pure? Are you pure in heart? Because that's who God blesses. In the Pixar movie Up, there's a dog that can talk because it has a collar around its neck, and it can talk. But it's an easily distracted dog, like most dogs are. And I think it kind of typifies the ADD thing. And for some reason, this often gets quoted to me where I will be talking, and in the moment of saying something important and enlightening, you guys know me well enough that that's true. When in the moment of saying something important, then all of a sudden I'll be distracted and I'll go off on some other topic. And in the movie, it's the word squirrel. For a dog, it's squirrel. And he's in the middle of something, distracted. Many of us live our lives that way. We are distracted by the world, by whatever motion is happening around us at that moment, whatever needs the most immediate attention. And so even if we think we're involved in something that's really important right now, if something else comes up, all of a sudden our attention completely shifts. Many of us live our lives trying to attempt this multitasking of everything. Parenting, career, our spouse, church, God, everything becomes a part of a big tangle. In another movie called Miss Congeniality, there's an FBI agent who's on special assignment. Her name is Gracie Hart. And in the middle of one of their assignments, she and another FBI agent are debating over each other which one is more committed to the job. And they do that by debating, by saying, I don't have essentially a life outside of the FBI. And her line in the movie is, I am the job. What does she mean by that? She means I'm fully devoted to this job. I'm single-minded, single person. I don't have a life outside of this. There's a sense in which she is portraying herself as saying, I'm pure FBI. That's all I do. That's all I think about. And so we kind of have two extremes here, don't we? The distracted ADD dog. We have the other extreme that says, this is all that I am. I'm going to suggest to you that in a sense, her idea of I am the job is close to what it means to being pure in heart. In the text, it says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. They are blessed, and the word blessed has the idea of someone who God approves of. God approves of those who are pure in heart. So what is it about being pure in heart that God approves of? And what does it mean to be pure in heart in that sense? The essential meaning that we're going to suggest to you, and I think we'll show that throughout the lesson, is that to be pure in heart means to be utterly sincere. Completely sincere in our hearts. It often amuses me when I go to a grocery store and I see a thing of orange juice and it says, this is 100% pure orange juice. I mean, it's in the name, Simply Orange, right? It's 100% pure. And you turn around on the back and you look at the ingredients. And what do the ingredients say? Orange juice and less than 1% of, and then name some other ingredients. Now, I agree, less than 1% of means it's very, very little, but they've added stuff. It's not 100% pure, is it? It's so annoying. Often when we think of the word pure, that's mainly what we think of. Something that's unadulterated, not contaminated by something else. Nothing's been added to it. I'm going to suggest to you that that's true, but there's more to it than that. That God is not just saying, I want you to be 100% morally pure in heart in this passage. He wants more from us than just that. Pure in heart has the idea of being single-mindedly devoted to God. When we are devoted to our Father, we strive to be morally pure too. That's going to naturally follow. But the focus has to be on Him, not on myself and not on my own pleasures, but I'm single-mindedly focused on Him. I think that David provides a really great example of this. You recall that when Saul, because of his disobedience, had been told by God that he was going to be replaced, the words that God used to describe the man he was seeking is that the Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, whom the Lord has commanded to be a prince over his people, because you've not kept what the Lord commanded you. So David becomes, the gold standard by which all the other kings of Judah and Israel are measured. He's the one that this is his heart, that was where it's at. And unfortunately, that doesn't continue with his son. It says of his son Solomon, 1 Kings chapter 11, verse 1, that his heart was not wholly true to Jehovah his God, as was the heart of David his father. And I think we find an interesting thought there. Now, a couple of verses down from that, in verse 6, it explains what it means to not be wholly true, that he didn't wholly follow Jehovah as his father had done. But that helps us, doesn't it? What does it mean to be a man after God's own heart? To be wholly true to God. This defines David. And that's the standard why, as you go through the books of 1st and 2nd Kings, you'll see that this is over and over again mentioned as the standard by which other kings are judged. Abijah, the next king after Solomon, he walked, it says, in all the sins of his father did before him, and his heart was not wholly true to Jehovah his God, as was David his father. He didn't follow it. Amaziah comes a little bit closer. Amaziah, it says in 2 Kings, the 14th chapter, he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Well, that's good. But the next said, yet not like David. Ouch. Right? He did what was right, but he wasn't wholly true. He wasn't wholly following God like David did. And the example that's mentioned in the verses that follow is he continued in offerings on the high places. In other words, he still engaged in some kinds of idolatry. He wasn't totally following God. Ahaz is mentioned as one who did not do right. He walked in the ways of the other kings of Israel. He burned his son in offering, and he brought them and made offerings in the high places. He didn't do what was right in the eyes of God, as David had done. David is that standard. He didn't follow. Josiah gets the best compliment that I could find of any of the kings. 2 Kings 22:2, it says, he did what was right in the eyes of Jehovah and walked in all the ways of David, his father, and he did not turn aside from it to the right or to the left. So Josiah gets this incredible compliment, doesn't he? He did what was right. He walked in all these ways. He was wholly true. Utterly sincere, wholly true, pure in heart. I'm going to suggest to you that these are the essential meaning of this. Its focus is on being wholly true to God. Utterly sincere before God. My heart, my life is open up before Him. And I'm going to obey Him. I'm going to walk in His ways. I'm going to seek Him in everything that I do. I think Jesus, as always, provides the best example of what it means to be pure in heart. If you go over to the book of Luke, the 4th chapter, you can see a time when Jesus had gotten up early one morning to go to the synagogue, and there he had worshipped again with the rest of the Jews. And after that, he left, and he went to Peter's house, and he healed Peter's mom. And that provoked the other people to start coming, and he healed people during that time. And this is after he had left the synagogue. And you'll notice down in Luke, the 4th chapter, verse 40, it says, now when the sun was setting, all those who were sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on them, every one of them, and healed them. So he goes to the synagogue on the Saturday morning. He worships. He starts healing people. As soon as the sun goes down, he starts healing people. Now, verse 42 says, and when it was day, he departed. Now, my inference from that is, what was Jesus doing all night long? He was healing people, right? The people were coming. There was a long line of people, and he was healing them. So he had been up from whenever he got up on that Saturday morning to go worship in synagogue, which I understood started near sunrise, so we're talking 6 or 7 in the morning, up all night. When the day dawned, he decides to leave. It says, And when it was day, he departed and went into a desolate place. And the people sought him and came to him and would have kept him from leaving them. Why would they have kept him from leaving them? Why did they want Jesus there? He was healing sick people, right? Isn't that a wonderful thing? Of course, we want you to stay. Please keep healing, keep going. We need you to do this. And Jesus says to them, I must preach the good news of the kingdom of God to the other towns as well, for I was sent for this purpose. Where's Jesus' compassion? I mean, there were sick people that needed to be healed there, weren't there? Now, you and I both know we're not really going to question Jesus' compassion, right? Jesus' compassion is amazing. So, Jesus did not lack compassion for these people, but his response to them was, I've done what I can do here, but I've got a purpose. I've got something that I have to do. I have to go to the other towns, and I have to preach to them. What is he preaching? The good news. Repent, for the kingdom of heaven's at hand. He's got to go. I was sent for this purpose. To teach people about the salvation that they can have in him. So that's where he went. Was Jesus pure in heart? He knew what his purpose was. And that's what he was going to do. Even though there were people hurting physically, he had a spiritual message for people who were hurting spiritually. And they needed to hear that message. In John, the 6th chapter, in verse 38, he said it this way, For I've come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. That's pure in heart. I've come down not to do what I want, but what he wants. And that's all he was going to do. In fact, in John the 17th chapter, verse 4, when Jesus is offering that prayer on the night that he's betrayed, that beautiful prayer to the Father, Jesus says this. I don't believe he's bragging here. He says, to God, I glorified you on earth, having accomplished the work that you gave me to do. God said, Jesus, this is the work I want you to do. Jesus said, I did that work, and that glorified the Father. That's pure in heart. I've accomplished what you wanted me to do. Isn't that a great thing to say? If you were to look back on your life as you were nearing death, could you say that about your life? I've accomplished the work that you want me to do. Could you say that to the Father? When you look at someone's obituary, usually what's it focused on? Pick up the newspaper today. It'll have a huge section of obituaries. And you'll see that they'll talk about a person's education, talk about their career, it'll talk about their family, it'll bring up their hobbies, and a few will even mention that they went to some church. Jesus' accomplishment was the will of his Father. I did what my Father sent me to do. That's pure in heart, single-minded in purpose. A few moments ago, we read Psalm 24. If you go back over to Psalm 24, it's a Psalm of David, so we're kind of sticking with that example of one who's wholly true to God. Psalm 24 extols the King of glory. Jehovah, he's the King of glory. And the question that's asked after describing the incredible creation, the question that's asked beginning in verse 3 is, who can approach this glorious King? Who shall ascend the hill of Jehovah? Who shall stand in his holy place? So who has the right to come before the King of glory? And there are 4 answers that are given by him. The first is, he who has clean hands and a pure heart. Clean that's being used in this passage is the same word that's used to distinguish between clean and unclean animals, between common and not common. And what he's saying, clean, not common. This is special. It's devoted to God. We see that usage. Pure in heart has the idea, of course, God only. I think the third one emphasizes that. Who does not lift up his soul to what is false. The New King James that Joey read used the expression idols. Idol does not lift up his soul to an idol. So it made it very clear. What does it mean to have clean hands and a pure heart? In part means I don't follow after false gods. And to me, that reminds me so much of what happened with Elijah up on Mount Carmel. Remember when the people of Israel at that time, they were worshiping Baal, but they were kind of also worshiping Jehovah. And so he goes up on Mount Carmel with the challenge. And he challenges those priests to show which God is the true God. And Jehovah shows that in a startling manner. But he asks a question of them before that happens. He asks them, how long will you limp between two opinions? Now, I want you to understand, the way that I often used to read that is, Elijah is not saying, how long are you trying to decide between two options? Shall I go this way or shall I go this way? What he's asking is, they were really trying to have both. They wanted it both ways. They wanted to follow after Baal because there were certain advantages to that, and they wanted to follow after Jehovah because there were certain advantages to that. And so what they ended up doing was limping between two opinions. How does one man follow two different paths? You really can't do that. How do we limp between two opinions in our lives? As strange as it sounds, I think we try to do it all the time, just like they did. It's not idolatry as such, but often there's God's way and there's my way. And I want the best of both worlds. That's not a conscious choice. It's not like I say, well, today, between 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., I'm going to follow God's way. And then from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., I'm just totally going to go on my way. We don't think like that, right? We go through life each moment trying to act as if we can have both paths all the time. So we think we follow God, but we're really following after our own desires. And God's way often becomes following my heart, is how we justify it. Well, I'm following my heart. And that's so dangerous. Do we not see that just like the Israelites, we're trying to multitask religion? We're trying to multitask God? And that sounds sad, because often what happens, God is minimized in our lives in those situations. The one who's going to approach God, the psalmist says, you have to be one who does not follow after false idols. And the next one that he brings up, who does not swear deceitfully. No lying. Okay, don't follow after and don't lie. Now, isn't that interesting? Clean hands, pure heart, doesn't follow after that which is false, and doesn't lie. No swearing falsely. That one fits in, believe it or not. I think so. Because when someone is lying, when they swear falsely, they're hiding things from other people. Their heart's not pure. They're trying to take advantage of the other person one way or another. They're trying to protect themselves. They're hiding something from the other person. Jesus gave a great warning to this about the Pharisees in Matthew the 23rd chapter. In Matthew the 23rd chapter, in verses 16 through 18. Woe to you blind guides who say, if anyone swears by the temple, it's nothing. But if anyone swears by the gold of the temple, he's bound by his oath. You blind fools, for which is greater, the gold or the temple that has made the gold sacred? And if you say, if anyone swears by the altar, it's nothing. But if anyone swears by the gift that is on the altar, he is bound by his oath. You blind men, for which is greater, the gift or the altar that makes the gift sacred? So whoever swears by the altar swears by it and by everything on it. And whoever swears by the temple swears by it and by him who dwells in it. And whoever swears by heaven swears by the throne of God and by him who sits upon it. Now, the essence of the argument that's being made here is the Jews had a habit. For example, if you were in business, I'm going to sell you this vehicle or whatever. I guess they didn't have vehicles. I'm going to sell you this camel, and this is the best camel I've ever had. And they would say, either they would say, I swear by the temple, or they would say, I swear by the gold of the temple. Now, if he says, this is the best camel I've ever had, I swear to you by the temple, this is the best camel I've ever had. You think, well, that sounds pretty good. But they'd gotten this little nuance in their heads where if you swear by the temple, that doesn't mean anything. But if you said, I swear by all the gold in the temple, that this is the best camel I ever, that was a meaningful one. That's pretty nuanced. That's tricky. And that's what they were doing. They were trying to use their language in such a way that they tricked people. They were swearing falsely using those little distinctions. And in doing so, they were dishonoring God. We need to understand that very much. They were showing complete disregard for God's temple, for the altar, for everything that was involved in worship, and they were doing it to benefit themselves. Is a person who does something like that, are they pure in heart? No. They're thinking only of themselves. They're not really trying to benefit you in any way. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Fully devoted to God, single-minded in our service, sincere in our hearts. Of course, that means that we're going to be pure before God. But it's not just like we see with the Pharisees. It's not just like an outward righteousness. It's not just going through the routines, but it's in our heart. Now, Jesus made a great point about this. If you'll go back to Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 22 through 24. Matthew, the 6th chapter, verses 22. We're going to start just with verse 22. It says, the eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. That word healthy in the King James and the American Standard is single. So when I was growing up, this verse didn't make any sense. So if your eye is single, your whole body will be full of light. I had no idea what that meant. And one time I was going with, I can't think of his name. Barnhart. What's this? Glenn. I wanted to call him Paul. Glenn Barnhart. I was going with Glenn Barnhart to a meeting in Ashfork, and he had talked about this and brought it up, and I said, Glenn, I have no idea what this means if your eye is single. And he pointed out that the idea of single in this passage has the idea of healthy. Well, we've got that now in this translation. But it means something that's clear, something that's open, something where there's nothing hidden in the eye. So he said it means something that's sincere, something that's single-minded. If your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. If your eye is focused on the right things, you'll be full of light. Now, we all know that this is true. If you're riding your bike, like some of us do, or if you're driving your car, what are we often told? You have to look where you're going. Don't look where you're not going. Because our tendency is, whichever direction we turn our head, that's the direction we will drift. It's especially true on a bike. You will drift in that direction. So we're told over and over again, keep your eye on the road. Not on the pretty girl on the sidewalk. I heard that. Nowadays, not on your cell phone. Keep your eye on the road so that you know exactly where you're going. Single eye, single focus. That's kind of the idea that we're looking at here. There's a part of me, and I know this is completely divergent, but there's a part of me that remembers the old Western cowboy shows where at some point the cowboy would jump and he would be riding on two horses, one leg on one horse and one leg on the other back of the horse, and inevitably there would be a path where there's a tree right in the middle. What does he have to do? He's got to pick a horse, right? Or he's going to be hurt. Really, that's what God is telling us to do with being pure in heart. Pick a horse. Get your focus where it needs to be, which needs to be on God. Don't try to ride two horses, but too often we try to do that. Now, in Matthew, the 6th chapter, verse 23, it continues after talking about that single or healthy eye. He says, but if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the eye in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Understand, there's only one path that you can follow. If your eye is bad, if your eye is divided, it's going to be bad, tragic for you. So a few verses down from that, that's emphasized again. The very next words that he talks about No one can serve two masters. Here's the best explanation of the single eye. It's right here in the text. I just didn't connect it, even though they're right next to each other. Because so often we read verse 24 just by itself. No one can serve two masters, for either he'll hate the one and love the other, or he'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. Did you notice the word that he used there? He will be devoted to one. Single-minded, pure. You have to be devoted to one or the other. You cannot serve God and money. It may not be money for you in this case, in this context, but you might need to read this and say, you can't serve God and pleasure. If that's what your struggle is. You can't serve God and fame. You can't serve God and. There is no God and when you're pure in heart. I serve God. In the book of James, James hits us really hard on exactly this point. In James, the 4th chapter, and in verse 8, James just really doesn't give us any wiggle room at all. James says, draw near to God, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, you sinners, and purify your hearts, you double-minded. Now, I don't know about you, but that sounds like an allusion to Psalm 24, doesn't it? The clean hands and the pure heart. And he says, you need to draw near to God. To do that, cleanse your hands, purify your hearts, and then what does he call us? Double-minded. Why? Because we're trying to have the best of both worlds. We're trying to have that which is spiritual and God and every blessing that goes with it, and we're trying to live like the world and have all the fun and pleasure that we think the world brings. And what does he tell you to do? Verse 9, be wretched and mourn and weep. As long as you're trying to be this double-minded person, your life is going to be miserable. You need to turn away from that. You need to turn away and turn to God. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. See, the problem is that when we're trying to blend worldliness and spirituality, we end up with something that doesn't really work. We're trying to mix apples and oranges, and you just can't bring them together in a way that's right. It doesn't work. Let's go to another Psalm of David, Psalm 86. This is one of David's psalms where he's pleading for God's help because the only one he can go to is God. But I want you to look with me specifically at verse 11, where David says, teach me your way, O Jehovah, that I may walk in your truth. Unite my heart to fear your name. I love this verse, because I think David gets right to the heart of what our biggest trouble is. And that is that we try to live this life with divided hearts. Consider all the different ways that you're pulled each day. And I'm not talking about illegitimate things at this point, right? It might be your spouse and taking care of that, your children, your parents, the work that needs to be done, the hobby that you have, church, entertainment. And you know, God needs to fit in there somewhere. And all of us want to say that God is first. God is most important. But then we find ourselves trying to squeeze him into our life, wherever he'll fit, in that one little spot that's left after we've done everything else. We treat God as if he's just one more piece of the puzzle. We try to plug him in. Is it not clear why we have divided hearts? I love David's solution. Unite my heart so I can fear your name. What we need is the single-minded, pure in heart attitude. A heart that's wholly devoted to God, following him truly, just like King David did. It's pure, because it's all his. My heart belongs to my God. Unite my heart to fear your name. And when we do that, I believe all the other aspects of our lives will flow from our devotion to God. How I treat my spouse, when my heart is fully given over to God, will be dictated by what God says about how to treat your spouse. Husbands, love your wives. Because of God's instruction, I treat, but it begins with God, not my spouse. And I think that's where we trip ourselves up sometimes. Everything begins with God. How I work, how I entertain myself, how I choose to spend my time. At the center of everything is God. In 1 Corinthians 10, verse 31, Paul said it this way. So whether you eat or drink, or whatever you do all to the glory of God. Whatever you do all to the glory of God. He says whether you eat or drink. In a few moments here, you're going to get to go eat lunch. Rudy's just opened. I'm so excited. I want to go up there and I want to have some brisket. I can eat that brisket to the glory of God. Does that sound odd? It sounds odd because we're trying to divide our lives from God in different ways. Whatever you do, whether you eat or you drink, do it to the glory of God. Everything about your life can be to the glory of God, eating brisket. Do it to the glory of God. Everything. When you sleep, when you eat, when you pray, when you work, do it all to the glory of God. That is pure in heart. And that's what he's calling us to. John puts it this way in the book of 1 John, in the 3rd chapter. When he says so beautifully, see what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called the children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. This is the great hope that we have. I am a child of God, and one day I'm going to be like him. I don't know what that means right now. I don't fully understand. But I'm going to be like him. And he concludes, and everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. I hope you're reading that a little bit differently than you used to this morning. I used to read that and say everyone who does this purifies himself means without sin. But I think part of what he's saying here, primarily what he's saying, just like Jesus was single-mindedly devoted to God, like he was wholly true to God, that's what I'm going to be. The moral purity is going to, of course, follow on those heels, just like he was pure. Everyone who has this hope purifies himself as he is pure. I want to follow him. So let's go out and let's be pure in heart. Let's stop this trying to multitask in that way. Be wholly true to God and to God only, like David was. Be pure in heart, single-minded. I will walk in his ways. I will be obedient to his will, and I will follow him joyfully every moment of my life. Let's be pure in heart. If you're subject to the invitation this morning, we want to make that opportunity available to you. Do you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God? Are you ready to be forgiven of your sins? If you believe and you're ready to repent, you can be baptized and those sins will be washed away. And you can begin that